Hi, my name is Patrick Cassidy. You're listening to The New Spy. I just wanted to weigh in with my opinions on Ferguson, Missouri. I think the Ferguson, Missouri is more than Michael Brown. I know I briefly mentioned it during the last podcast, but I thought I'd give a whole new YouTube podcast to cover this. Americans, at least for my whole life, I'm 30 years old, have been dealing with the militarization of police harassment. Law enforcement has been writing their own laws. They have their own lobbyists. And more the younger generations of Americans, especially my generation and younger, are waking up to the fact that, we don't really have any control over our legislatures. There are some positive developments. I signed the American Anti-Corruption Act. This was created by a college professor named Professor Lessig. And it basically would remove money out of politics, and instead of lobbyists and corporations, super PACs, paying the politicians, the people would be the largest donors of the politicians. And although I support this movement, and I think that that's going to be the next huge development in the next American Revolution, I think that we have a long ways to go in order to raise awareness amongst the large majority of the population that we don't really live in a democratic republic. The principles in which this country was originally founded was republicanism, which developed out of the Enlightenment. And during the Enlightenment, the idea was that you can't have a government who writes its own laws. You have to have a people, and in a Republican's case, who have a representative who represents the people. But the people ultimately are in charge of the law. The idea is that they elect a representative, and the representative passes the laws that they want. Otherwise, he or she won't get elected. Well, our republic is corrupt. I would classify the American government as a pseudo-republic. I know that John Adams actually used the term, pseudo-republic, pseudo-democracy. And he predicted that an aristocracy was going to be the biggest threat to American future politics. And he predicted that correctly. The sort of Ivy League college system that we have, where people with the most money, they raise their children from a very young age, and they can easily do this because they have enough money to keep their children out of trouble, out of harm's way, and pressure them to go to these Ivy League colleges, or in some cases, and some people have suspected George Bush Jr. was one of these cases, even if they're out snorting cocaine and partying and doing whatever, they have enough money to quite literally buy their way into college. But why don't we have anybody from the African American community, from community colleges, or from smaller, lesser known, less prestigious colleges going into government service? And the answer is obvious. It's class warfare. What's going on in Ferguson right now is not necessarily simply racial. There's a lot of people in the mainstream news trying to make a race war out of it. And I don't think you can ignore the race. Like, don't take this the wrong way. You can't ignore the racial discrimination, that exists, but the racial discrimination, just like slavery, is an excuse for class warfare. Slavery wasn't about people hating black people. Slavery was about the amount of money that you make from owning slaves. So they used race as an excuse to cover up a financial goal, which was more of a driving factor for chattel slavery in America. What we see going on in Ferguson is a upper middle class or a middle class group of police officers. They're making less and less money, but they make decent middle class wages, $55,000 a year. And you don't really see those wages for people who don't go to college or who don't have a college degree. The large majority of citizens in Ferguson, there's no job where you can see those wages. You can start your own business and you can be a business owner, but if you work for the business, you're not going to make as much money as the police. So the police, and a lot of people don't like to admit that they're poor, But if you look at the statistics and if you look at the makeup, the police are making more money than the people whom they're policing. They are a dying breed of middle-class citizens. Police are still citizens, but they're also, public workers, or they're supposed to be public servants. Because they've achieved this sort of middle-class status, and that middle-class status is becoming more difficult to achieve, they work for the wealthier class. They're working for all these private corporations they're buying their military gear off of are the upper class. They're making millions of dollars. Hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars is the typical class bracket of people who are in the military-industrial complex. So that's really what I see going on in Ferguson. And even though I plan on being a private investigator, I'm in the process of creating my own business right now. I'm still a pro-constitutional, pro-republicanism, pro-enlightenment. I'm hesitant to call myself a libertarian because I lean left on a lot of concepts, but I am more of a libertarian-leaning political ideologist. So when I create my own private investigatory business, I understand the need for spying. I understand the need for police. It's like if somebody's out to kill your mother, yeah, of course you're going to support the police. You don't want... It's not like you can rush from, drop everything you're doing with your family and say, oh, we don't need police, and go and rush over there and, save your mother if she's in trouble. Although some people, definitely would do that. We definitely need police, and you get some people in the public who, when they think of police, they think of the good things police are doing. I have a lot of friends who are police officers, and that's what you hear a lot. Like when they hear things at Ferguson, they actually begin to view the public as enemies. And they say, oh, you're ungrateful. They risk their lives every day. Well, that's not really true. You look at the statistics. Actually, police are usually late to a crime. You're better off owning a gun and defending yourself. And the people the citizens who support the police religiously treat them as if they're a sort of holy cow. And I don't mean that with any offense to Hindus. I'm just using a figure of speech. A holy cow meaning you're not allowed to criticize them. You're not allowed to say anything bad about police. People do the same thing with the military. It's like a soldier can go in and kill a bunch of innocent Iraqis. A sniper can go in and just have fun shooting civilians all day long. Say, oh, well, you can't criticize them because they're risking their life for you. Well, that's not really true. And, when we see how the police treat citizens in Ferguson, I'm wondering how long it's going to take until people wake up and realize this isn't just about Michael Brown. Now, I hope Michael Brown gets justice. And I do support those protesters who think that this is solely about Michael Brown. But I also think it's selfish, if it were my son or my daughter who died, it would be selfish of me to say, oh, this is all about me. If you're out there engaging in civil disobedience, you're going against the will of what I would want for my child. Well, that's very selfish. Even though you're not being selfish thinking about your family, you're being selfish not thinking about other people's families. What happened to Michael Brown happens to thousands of people per year. Those are real statistics. You can go look them up in DOJ statistics. Unarmed civilians are being killed at a higher rate than civilians in Iraq. Unarmed civilians here in America, this is an actual statistic, are being killed at a higher rate than unarmed civilians in Iraq. Now that Iraq has ISIS, we have this sort of terrorist threat, but in terms of democide, government killing their civilians, here in America, we have a much higher rate than other countries. So there is a revolution that's happening, and the question is, do you have the courage to stand up against your government? Do you have the courage to put aside whatever your financial dealings are and care about your fellow citizens? This is The New Spy. Thank you for listening, and wish you all good luck.